My name is Alex Yampolskiy. I'm a CEO of SecurityScorecard, the leading security rating platform in the world. In this video series called Security DNA, I'm going to talk to people from all walks of life, board members, CIOs, CISOs, industry innovators, about what cybersecurity means to them and the latest trends. Welcome.
So Mike is the author of Cisco Internet Applications and Solutions. He's been an adjunct professor at NYU, teaching information security. He's also had various leadership roles in financial services, including AQR Capital, where he served as a vice president in the information technology group. He worked at Marvel Entertainment, leading the security and enterprise architecture teams, protecting Iron Man. And most recently, he's the Chief Security Officer for SecurityScorecard. So welcome, Mike. So my first question to you is, what are the three things that most excite you about cybersecurity industry?
One of them, obviously, the ever-changing nature of threats. It's never a dull day or moment when you're working in InfoSec and cybersecurity. I think we can pretty much agree. There's no days off. We're constantly battling against all sorts of threats. Number two, there's an incredible rewards that it delivers for those who are curious. Hackers are not all bad actors. Some of us are actually just turning the doorknob to see if it's locked, not to steal or destroy what sits on the other side of the door. So I really enjoy the sort of curiosity inherent in hacking and defending against hackers. And then three, we need millions of new recruits to join the battle who are going to bring with them insights and innovations. I started teaching at NYU this past spring, and I'm really enjoying shaping the minds and paths, of the next generation of InfoSec professionals, because I want to help bring more diversity into the teams of researchers, practitioners, and leaders everywhere, because cybersecurity should be a domain that values all kinds of people.
Thank you, Mike. So looking ahead to the near future, are there critical threats on the horizon that you think companies need to start preparing for?
Quantum computing is going to devastate the world of cryptography as it's currently practiced. And I know you studied cryptography. You have a PhD from Yale in the subject, so I'm sure you're quite aware of the challenges that quantum computing is going to bring to the threat of privacy and secret communications, because the math behind our pre-quantum algos and encryption techniques is just going to be broken. So I think this is like 5 or 6 years out. On the other hand, I think quantum storage could bring a much needed dose of data integrity. So recall that InfoSec has 3 fundamental pillars with which it's concerned, right? Availability, integrity, and confidentiality. If the act of observing a qubit of information stored on a quantum storage device changes that information, then the integrity of your digital vote could be guaranteed. And so I really think that we should be putting money and effort into quantum storage and quantum voting technology, for example. And then 2, the other things on the horizon, which kind of showed up very much in force with the SolarWinds supply chain attack and this wake-up call, is that our work from remote kind of exposed our collective infrastructures to a huge data risk, and the hack has just brought home how important third-party risk mitigation has become. New architectures and more tools. Essentially, there's really only one network, right? There's not an inside and an outside and a private network. It's all just the internet. And so I think if you had, looked at some of the signals, from the bad actors, and I really love what FireEye did, an excellent blog post about the attack. They really helped us, understand what was going on. I think there's 2 kinds of CISOs in the world at this point. There's pre-breach CISOs, and there's post-breach CISOs. And obviously, when I read all of these statements from all these companies that we know were impacted because we saw their sunburst, traffic beaconing out to those domains for the command and control servers, when they come back to us and say, we have no evidence of a breach, I think absence of proof is not really proof of absence, right? They didn't know that they were there since October 2019 or earlier, operating on their network.
What are some of your favorite cybersecurity tools that you frequently use?
I like to share a couple of them. I use a tool called Sublister. I use curl, and I use Nmap. Sublister, I mean, obviously there's lots of great tools that come with the Kali Linux toolkit that are indispensable and useful. But when I really want to get to know a company a little bit better, these are my go-to commands. So Sublister, and it has a 3 for the E, in its spelling. It's a GitHub hosted Python script, and it generates a list of FQDNs for a domain name, and it searches the various sources of OSINT, right? Open source intelligence. It goes and looks in all the search engines. It looks under VirusTotal. It looks under all these different sources for you, and nothing speaks to me as much as a company's ability to name things, and thus expose a lot about their application stack, their technology platforms. So if I see an interesting domain name or subdomain name pop out of Sublister, then I use curl to make my first sort of innocent command request towards that host. I usually do like a curl-i just to show the headers. I don't really care about the contents of a web page. I care about the versions that are disclosed. And as you well know, and this is one of the reasons why SecurityScorecard has so much information on the rated companies, is that there's a lot of information disclosure there that's very, very helpful for us to understand their security posture and whether or not they're patching and hardening their systems as they should.
What are some of the most common cybersecurity mistakes that you've seen companies make?
Has to begin with data classification. And it's really common actually for a company to not have actually documented its data classifications. So at the very least, I think there should be 4. Public, internal, confidential sensitive, and confidential restricted. Some companies like to have finer grained classifications, that's fine, but this should suffice at a minimum. And then secondly, these same companies, they often don't even have tools and processes in place to discover confidential data on what I'd call unstructured sources, such as file shares and cloud-based document repositories. So you have this huge unquantified risk, and you don't have policy that you can implement it against it without having a data classification and a data discovery technique. So on a quick related note, a lot of companies also don't have a document retention policy. So I see a lot of companies save everything forever. And that actually becomes a really big legal risk in case those documents are subpoenaed. When I worked at the Chicago Mercantile Exchange, we had a very strong records information management policy, and we needed to prune and purge with prejudice in order to avoid being exposed to the potential risk of having documents, from 11 years ago that should have been, deleted 7 years ago.
Great insights. And my last question is, what in your opinion are the 5 things that every company needs to know to tighten up its approach to data privacy and cybersecurity?
The world has changed drastically in 2020, and there's no way that your risk posture has remained the same. So fresh security assessment for everyone, number 1. Number 2, pick a framework and against which your organization is going to measure its risks. Number 3, there's this concept that I'm kind of seeing emerge called privacy engineering. And it's kind of a new job description that I think a lot of companies are going to have to start staffing for. It's kind of at the intersection of AppSec or application security, database engineering, and your legal team. So GDPR brought this onto everyone's radar and spoke about privacy by design and related topics, and how your organization architects its data for privacy by design, which I think translates directly to security by design. And then, of course, how do you digitally migrate your workloads to the cloud? Make sure privacy engineering is a thing. Number 4, when you discuss those items on your risk register with the board, and of course, make sure you have a risk register. You need to discuss third-party risk. Everyone has a non-trivial amount of vendor risk that needs to be measured and managed. And obviously, we can help a lot of companies do that, and in an automated, very frequent fashion. And then last, number 5, self-assessment of risk and exposure to security threats. It really can't continue at this leisurely pace of annual questionnaires and reviews of security controls. A lot of times those questionnaires get filled out by an intern. It's a creative fiction that comes back. We can tie together our ratings platform with those questions and answers, and we can actually confirm or deny some of those attestations. And so I think it's really important for people to understand that we need to move beyond annual, self-assessments, and we need event-based assessments, where if a score drops on one of your primary, vendors that's a tier 1 data classification critical sensitive, you're going to want to automatically send them a SIG Lite or a SIG Full and get them to explain why, that change in posture was observed.
Mike, thank you so much for being with us and for your invaluable insights. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Alex.